Bienvenidos otra vez a este panel de mujeres líderes. En este caso vamos a hablar con Sweta Ghelani, que es la presidente y gerente general de Medicinas Innovadoras de Novartis Argentina. Les aviso, esta entrevista va a ser en inglés, así que voy a presentarla otra vez. Es Sweta Ghelani, President and General Manager of Innovative Medicines for Novartis Argentina. Did I say that right?
Perfect.
I wanted to ask you, Sweta, about your personal journey inside the company, but also your professional journey before Novartis. What about what came before, and how did you manage to reach the top of Novartis in Argentina?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I just love the opportunity to be here, and I think the question's an excellent one. I think I've been very, very fortunate and lucky because I've had the opportunity to work in 4 different continents and 4 different countries with Novartis. And so I started in Australia, but then I moved to head office in Basel, Switzerland, and then from there to the very French-speaking Montreal in Canada, and now here in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And I think to have that kind of diverse experience is a real gift. But actually, before I joined the industry, I started as a hospital pharmacist in a major teaching hospital in Australia, right in the middle of the HIV pandemic. And so that's how I started my career within the system.
So you went through a lot in the 80s.
Yes, I mean, it was such an incredibly difficult and challenging time. I think for me, being part of this industry, one of the things that inspires me is knowing that actually I will see, I think, the end of this pandemic in my lifetime, which after seeing patients die in hospitals in the late 80s and 90s is really quite incredible.
Oh, I see. Obviously, it's been a long time since this disease spread throughout the world, and it's such a great thing to see it coming to an end.
Yes, I think now you'll see with the industry, there's been great advances in pre- and post-exposure prophylaxis. And so we now have a way to actually contain the infection and hopefully stop the pandemic.
I wanted to ask you if it was tough moving to Argentina, moving to a Spanish-speaking country, as a woman, being the top person in Novartis Argentina. How did you manage?
Well, I would say this is, I think it's the 3rd language I've tried to learn, because when I was actually in Basel, Switzerland, I tried to learn German, which is muy difícil, let me tell you, not like French or Spanish. When I was in Montreal, I learnt French for 4 years. And so coming here, I think probably the hardest thing about speaking Spanish is it's very phonetic, where French, you almost never pronounce the last 3 letters of any word. But that being said, was it hard to come here? I had been told that it would be hard to come here as a female general manager. But I have to tell you, the welcome surprise that I had was when I walked through the doors of CIAMI, which is the trade association for multinationals. I walked into a room and I saw a whole bunch of female general managers of multinationals in Argentina. And it wasn't what I was expecting, and it was the most beautiful surprise.
It was a great surprise to see so many women in the pharmaceutical industry, right?
I think it's fantastic, and I think it shows you that we're finally seeing gender equality within the industry, which wasn't always the case.
Wasn't always the case in Argentina, or worldwide, do you mean?
Well, I can't speak for Argentina because I wasn't here a decade ago, but I can certainly say to you that a decade ago, when I would walk into a senior leadership room, it would almost be predominantly men. And that was just a decade ago. Now, fast forward 10 years, and the world has changed, right? If I look at Novartis Argentina, we're actually very, very gender balanced. And if you look at the leadership team that I have for Innovative Medicines, we actually have a majority of women in our leadership team.
That's
and
fantastic.
I think that sends an incredible message to young talents, an even better message to young female talents, because if you can see it, then you can be it, right?
That's right. It's very important to see an example in an industry that used to be run by men.
I have to tell you, the old adage is representation matters. Representation matters.
Let's talk a bit about diversity.
See?
So, bueno, bueno, okay. What about the EPIC pledge? I think it's a very innovative policy from Novartis. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so I have to tell you that I come with a bit of bias here. I love the EPIC pledge. And I love the EPIC pledge because basically it's about transparency. It's saying that we're going to communicate to every associate in Novartis where they sit in terms of the band for pay for that particular job.
Okay.
And what that means is that women and men can see where they sit in the band. And as somebody who, very early on in my career was told, I don't know why, but you seem to have been underpaid for a couple of years, so now we have to keep bumping up your salary. To know that we have that level of transparency creates incredible accountability, right?
Yeah.
It creates accountability of how are we making these promotional decisions? How are we dealing with unconscious bias to make sure that we're giving all talents an equitable chance of success?
And surely women are excited about this policy, right?
Absolutely. I think everybody's excited about transparency. I think, for me as a leader, I think transparency is probably one of the core platforms I run on. Because when we speak transparently to all of our associates, we create accountability. We create an adult-to-adult conversation versus a parent-to-child conversation. So I think accountability is a great platform to run on with transparency.
Great. And what about you? Do you mentor younger females in your company, in your team?
So one of the things that I'm super excited about in Novartis Argentina is that we have a very gender-balanced and diverse organisation. So there's plenty of young female talents to mentor and sponsor. And I want to make the difference between those two things clear, right? Because for me, I know that in my career, there were sponsors who advocated for me in the room when I wasn't there. People that actually said, she's ready to take that next leadership position. So in this role, and I always said to myself, if I ever became a general manager, I was going to intentionally spend time to mentor women, to sponsor women, to pay it forward, so that future generations can continue to have incredibly successful careers. And the only thing that should stop them would be their ambition, right?
Sure, that's meritocracy for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering what your legacy would be within Novartis in general, not Novartis Argentina just in this country, but in general. What is your legacy?
I think the legacy of any leader, but one that I'm very passionate about, is I think you want to create future leaders for the organisation, not just locally, but globally, right? And I think probably the secondary point to that is I want to create leaders who don't fit the traditional mould, right? Leaders who look different from how we imagine leaders to look like. So for me, I think the legacy is always to create future leaders. Now, in Argentina, I would say, one thing I've learned in the last 12 months is Argentinians are natural problem solvers. I've never seen anything like it, right? But I think, when we're trying to create future leaders, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to build capability. And what I mean by that is, how do we increase people's self-awareness so that people are really aware of where their strengths are, but also, what are the things that trigger me and that on a bad day, right? Having that self-awareness to self-regulate and bring your best self to work every day. I think the other thing as well is definitely, how do you deal with ambiguity? Now, the great thing about Argentina is it creates an environment that is always uncertain. Uncertainty is the norm here. And so you learn very quickly how to tango from crisis to crisis.
That's what we do.
Absolutely, and I've seen that myself firsthand. But I think the thing in the crisis is, how do you make great decisions? So building that capability of making great decisions when you don't have perfect information. And I think the last thing is agility, right? We need leaders that are agile. And recently, what we've seen in the organisation is we've seen people moving out of their comfort zone. So we've got commercial people who are now stepping in to lead medical teams, and medical teams that are stepping in to now do access roles. So they're stepping completely out of their area of expertise to learn a new capability. Now, fast forward that down the track, and what you're going to see is much more aware and effective leaders, I think.
I want to ask you two last questions.
Sí.
One has to do with what are the next plans for you as a leader in Argentina, in Novartis? And also, I wanted to ask you about the glass ceiling. Is it tough for women to break through the glass ceiling?
So I'm going to start with the second question first, if that's okay. I think, and I have been asked this question before, I think if you are a young woman in a company, take a good hard look at the leadership team. Because if you're walking into a boardroom like I did 10 years ago that is filled with men, the reality is you have an organisation that perhaps hasn't moved with the times, and maybe it's going to be a little bit tougher for you to sit at that senior table. If you have an organisation, which I think currently mine is, which I'm very proud of, if you have a gender balanced, highly diverse leadership team, then breaking that glass ceiling is definitely easier, particularly if the organisation has measures in place to address unconscious bias. Because if you then feed that into hiring, selection, organisational talent reviews, you're naturally going to make the path easier for that glass ceiling to be broken.
Great. And what about some of the achievements that you've made under your administration? Let's say like.
Yeah, I have to say a big shout out to my team and the teams that work for them. I could not be more proud of the teams I work with in Argentina. And the reason for this is the level of progress that has been made towards public-private partnerships. I've been in this industry 20 years, and when I started, there was this very naive hypothesis that the industry made great medicines and we came in and we had all the solutions and all the answers. And it's so naive, right? Because that's not how the real world works. In the real world, we have a fragmented healthcare system. We have patients waiting longer than they should for treatment. We have so many actors, whether that's provincial governments, Ministry of Health, clinicians in the system, the actual structures themselves. And so what I'm super proud of that I've been able to witness in my time here in Argentina is how our teams have worked together on public-private partnerships, and the diversity of that. We've done that in ultra-rare diseases with the Ministry of Health, and we've done it around a cause of cardiovascular disease, which is actually the #1 cause of death of Argentinians. And we've done that work in the provinces. So these public and private partnerships that I've seen are some of the best that I've seen in my career, and I see it as the future of how the industry continues to work together with all the actors in the system to basically create a bigger impact.
Sweta, it has been great having you here. Thank you very much for being.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for the amazing questions, and it's been wonderful to be here.
Thank you very much. Y para los que están en casa viéndonos, todavía queda un poco más de mujeres líderes. No nos dejen.